when it was rejected twice, or in two different contexts, and I created the third context, we had to fight for 2 years to get it accepted by anybody, and then another 4 years to get anywhere near making any money, and then another 2 years to get ITV International to make the TV series. Perseverance. Stick it. I mean, if you really, really believe in it, stick with it. If you pay somebody else to help with your SEO, here's a little hint. Is if whatever they're doing doesn't serve one or more of understanding, credibility, or deliverability, they're doing something that isn't going to help. So basically, it's an easy way for you to say which one does it serve, and if they can't make a decent argument for it serving one or more of those pillars, tell them they're getting it wrong.
Welcome to the Quest for Questions podcast, and joining me today is someone who describes himself as a digital marketer, musician, and a cartoon blue dog. After our conversation, I would more accurately call him the first professional double bass player who had no idea how to play it, the first digital nomad with an address between sea and the post office, Mauritius, and finally the only person who can make brand SERP and SEO an exciting conversation topic for someone even outside of digital marketing. If you stick long enough, you will even learn a French word that better describes a person with drive. This is Conrad, the Yerba Mate Addict, and here's an interview with one and only Jason Barnard. Enjoy. So welcome, Jason, to the Quest for Questions podcast. And I'm excited to talk to you today. It's mostly going to be, I think, about digital marketing, but there's also some other topics like digital nomadism and kind of living on desert islands and kind of going through a lot of different careers in your life. So maybe let's start first with something that I read on your profile. I think on Matchmaker. That's where we met.
That sounds like a dating site, by the way, but it isn't. It's a bringing podcasters and guests together platform.
It's like a Tinder, but for podcast people. Yeah, that was a good clarification. I forgot to mention. But that's where me and Jason met, and I'm on the lookout for uncommon people, and I thought, just looking at you, that you had a lot of like kind of uncommon things you did in your life. So I guess first thing I would want to start with is that you mentioned that you were always part of like a gig economy, and you went from like being a punk folk musician to starring in a TV cartoon that became quite popular, to then finally, running your own digital agency, and then being a digital nomad living on Mauritius. So can you kind of paint us the story of how it came about that you first got into music, and then you always remained in the gig economy, and then you finally settled on the digital marketing, and specifically the what's it called, brand SERP, so mostly focusing on Google search.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, brand SERPs is a brand search engine results page. It's what Google shows when they Google your brand name to either look you up and figure out who you are and what you do, or to come to your site. And it's phenomenally important. But that's at the end, the really clever part, when I'm going to be wearing the glasses. But for the folk punk, I take the glasses off because I don't need to look clever for this part. I mean, I've always been in the gig economy. I went to university in Liverpool. I played the Cavern Club, where the Beatles played. That was my claim to fame during my time there, with the world's worst blues band. We were called Stanley the Counting Horse for reasons completely off the wall, and we played loads of blues gigs. I was really thin. I was this thin and quite small.
Good old days.
Good old days. And I still had this big, deep voice. So I used to sing like these big blues songs, like I'm a Man. And people just look at me and go, like, how's that coming out of his mouth? He's incredibly small and incredibly thin. And he's got this big kind of deep, thundering voice, which was quite funny. We played the Cavern Club, which was great. And I'm terribly pleased about that. Oh, and if you look up alumni of John Moores University, I sometimes come up alongside John Lennon because he went to the same school as I did. So that's a nice kind of trick. This is the intellectual part that I'm playing with the knowledge graph, is I can get myself put next to John Lennon in Google. back to the real life when in fact I don't know John Lennon. He was there years and years before me. So absolutely nothing to do with him except for the fact I happened to hang out at the same college he did. But then I left Liverpool and moved to Paris because I was in love with a French woman.
So that's right.
Yeah, well, I moved to Paris because we've been exchanging postcards. This was when the internet didn't exist. Literally, this was.
When was that?
1988. Well, I think it might have just existed, but we certainly didn't know. And we used to exchange postcards, and these kind of terribly deep and meaningful postcards, very short, obviously, with I love you, and then you kind of think. Now I think about it and go, the postman was reading this stuff. I mean, he must have been having such a good laugh with these awful postcards coming from France. And vice versa, I assume. And then I moved there and literally moved my entire life there because I thought I was going to move. And I didn't bother asking her if she was interested. And I turned up at her doorstep, knocked on the door. She opened the door, and she went, "Oh, this is my boyfriend." And
oh, really?
Going out with a guy. And he was an economist as well. I did a degree in economics. And I then said to him, "He's an economist. I'm an economist. He's good looking, I'm good looking. He's boring, I'm funny." And she wouldn't have it. So that was a lost opportunity. And then her mum decided that she liked me, so she let me stay in the Chambre de Bonne in Paris, little room above. And unfortunately, it was right above this girl's bedroom. So I spent 6 months. Obviously, I'll let your imagination run wild with that one, but it was a bit weird.
Okay, yeah.
And then I was going to go home back to the UK. I didn't really want to, but I was thinking, living in Paris, isn't this cool? And I had 50 francs actually, sorry, at the time. And it was enough to get a bus ticket. And I said, right, if I don't find a job today, I'll go home. And look, I was looking around, and somebody said to me, "Why don't you apply to be an English teacher?" I said, "Okay." So I rang up 3 English schools, English language schools. One of them said, "Yeah, you can have 5 hours a week as from next week." So I said, "Oh, all right, I'll stay." So that was my first gig job, as it were, in Paris, completely outside of anything I'd imagined I'd be doing. And
how old were you at this point?
22, I think.
That's
I
great.
absolutely hated it. I really hated teaching English. I mean, teaching's okay. I like teaching. I mean, now I teach like on Brown SERP courses, digital marketing, and I love it. And I think I'm a good teacher. I think I express things correctly and clearly, bring people through to understanding what it is I've understood and making sense of what is actually a very complicated subject. But when you dig down and you manage to explain it, I would say properly or clearly, it's actually really, really simple. So back to English teaching. The worst thing about English teaching is what they say is get the person to talk to you and just correct them incessantly. And the problem with that is that you speak English, or I speak English so well, it's my native language, is that I don't even have to listen to people to be able to, as soon as they make a mistake, it triggers my ear. So I could sleep most of the time. They make a mistake, I wake up and say, "No, that's wrong," correct it, and then go back to sleep again. And the problem with that is, it sounds easy, but it's just boring. And it's boring listening to most people. Oh, I did say, please do interrupt me, because none of us are interesting for a minute, but these students weren't interesting for 5 seconds.
Okay.
So there you go. Now, in Paris, gigging, as it were, doing work as an English teacher, and then some friends of mine said, "Do you want to join our band?" Because they knew I was a singer.
Oh, okay. But in UK or in the
no, in Paris, it was 3 English guys in Paris playing in the street, basically, and they had a few gigs in small bars, and they were playing in the street and they were making a good living. They were playing in the street and playing in the metro. They used to leap into the metro in the morning. They'd leap into the train carriages, play 3 songs, pass the hat around, jump off again. Making a great living. And they said, "Do you want to join the band?" And I said, "Oh yeah, great. I'm a singer." They said, "Oh, we don't need a singer. We can all sing." I said, "Well, I can play a bit of guitar." And they said, "We don't need a guitar player. We've got a guitar player. We need a double bass player." I thought, "I don't play the double bass." And they said, "Well, if you learn the double bass, in 30 days, you can play in our band." So I bought a double bass with my last 500 pounds because I had £500 in a bank account because my grandfather had died, unfortunately, in between times and left me £500. So I went back to the UK, got the money out of the bank, went to buy. I saw an advert in the paper, and it was a double bass for sale. I went, okay. Went round there, and the guy said, okay, here you go. And he had like 100, he had 5 or 6 double basses. And he was a double bass teacher. And he said, well, one of my students has got really good at the double bass, so he's selling this one because it isn't up to standard for him. Do you want to try it? And I was going, no, I don't want to try it at all. No, I'll just buy it, please. And bought it and brought it back in the days when you crossed the English Channel on a ferry. So I actually had to carry it onto the ferry, carry it across, then carry it off the other side, back onto the train and through to Paris. And then sat down and, well, didn't sit down, stood up at my house and learned to play it in 30 days, which was, I'd love to say I was really good at it and natural, but it was a bit of a struggle, to be honest. But what they did, the band, we used to have these places in Paris where you would play, and there were some places that made loads of money and some places that made not very much money. They were called pitches, Pitches. And they traded, everyone took their turn. It was terribly well organized and people were terribly fair. And they traded the best pitch in the city for a week with another group for lessons for me for the double bass so that I could actually get up to speed. And it was this improbably small German guy who played the double bass. You know, the double bass is this big and he was this big. And he was amazing, a guy called Franz. He was such a nice guy and such a good double bass player. And he gave me a 2-hour lesson. The first hour was basically showing me where the notes were, showing me how to slap it. And the second hour was, and when you're really good, this is what you'll be able to do. And he spent an hour just showing me all the great things he could do on the double bass. I was just going, I'm not getting there, mate. But he gave me advice at the end, which is what saved my bacon, as it were, is that he said, right, rules of the game are you get up on stage and you smile. You never stop smiling. Whatever happens, you can play all the bum notes you want, you can make all the mistakes you want, you can do whatever you want, but never stop smiling. Rule number 1.
The best music advice.
Great. Well, it's actually very good music advice. So any musicians out there, good hint. Because when you're smiling, you look confident. When you look confident, people imagine you know what you're doing, even if you don't. The next one was slap it in time. Always hit it in time. Just think about the rhythm all the time. And if you get this hand wrong, which is the notes, if you play a bum note, a wrong note, there are 2 types of people in the audience. One is people who've got no idea about music and they don't hear it. They simply don't know you've played the wrong note. This is on the bass. And there are jazz musicians who will hear it. But if you're smiling enough and you look confident enough, they'll think you've done something really clever that they don't understand, and they won't dare ask you about it. And that's it. And he says, so nobody in the room actually knows when you make a mistake or cares. They don't know and they don't care is the double thing. And every time you make a mistake, forget about it. Just put it behind you. And if you can do that, everything in front of you is always everything is possible. And if you focus on where you went wrong before, that whole kind of field just closes down, and you're going to make more and more mistakes. It's going to snowball. Which was genius advice, because that's all I did for a month. Basically, I didn't really learn to play the double bass. I just hit it in time and thought about forgetting mistakes and imagining that the people in the audience hadn't noticed what I'd done. And then on the day itself, he was quite small, so he actually stood on a table right at the back of the room. And throughout the gig, he was going, every time I didn't smile, and every time I made a mistake, he went, and it was brilliant. And he got me through the gig, and I got in a band, and the rest is history, as they say.
And then you stuck with it for like 8 years, I think, right? With the band?
Yeah, playing in a band. In fact, when we played in the street and we were making very good money, and I started organising gigs, and I wanted to play gigs. I mean, we basically rang up bars and said, can we play in your bar? And luckily for us, if you know the Mano Negra, Manu Chao's first group.
No, I had no idea.
Oh, Manu Chao's very famous. French musician. Mano Negra is basically the Clash play folk music in French and Spanish. And they're awesome. They were really, really good. And what they did was opened up the French alternative music scene. So at the beginning of the 90s, or end of the 80s actually, you know, French music was all Johnny Hallyday and I can't remember who else was around at the time, but you know, these, let's say, bland French musical artists. It was very variété, we call it in French, which is pretty awful, dirgy pop music. And what they did is they went round to every single record shop and they would take their literal records and they would put them in the shop. Play
Your
the
band
gig.
or who?
No, another band, Mano Negro.
Oh, okay.
And they would play the gig and they would tell everyone at the gig, don't buy our record here. You can't buy it here. You have to buy it in the shops. So people would then go to the shop the next day, buy out all the stock. The shop would think, this is brilliant. We're selling loads of records. And they would restock. And they managed to get an entire musical movement. It's not just them. There were the Garçon Boucher were there as well, and several others. And there was an alternative rock scene, which was basically folk music played punk. And it's a really, really, really lovely thing to have been in. And we were basically just behind all of these groups. So we got the benefit of everything that they'd done to open it up. So it's actually quite easy for me to organize tours. And so we then moved from playing in the street to being able to play tours, obviously playing small bars, but also big festivals would have us. And we managed to make 4 albums, and we sold 40,000 albums in France.
Wow.
So it was a reasonably successful. I mean, in terms of festivals, we played with the Pogues. We played on the same bill as Bob Dylan, believe it or not. And it was a professional music career for somebody who didn't really know how to play the double bass with a band who were playing punk folk music. We can call it poke if you want, P-O-L-K.
But at some point you must have actually learned how to play decently, right?
Well, I jumped forward literally 30 years. And I started playing with a banjo player and a guitar player. And the banjo player finally convinced me that I am actually quite a good musician. And that I'd just been saying I only play the double bass functionally, but in fact, I am quite a good double bass player and I do know much more than I let on. So I kind of played it down, but that initial kind of starting off thing, what it was for me was I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to play big stadiums full of like 30, 40,000 people. Never happened, but you know, when you're in a band, you think you're completely convinced it's going to happen.
Okay.
And it's obviously never going to happen. But in your mind, you're driving. We used to do like 100,000 kilometers a year for 6 years in a row.
Wow.
And you'd be sitting in the van just going, it'll all be worth it. It'll all be worth it because we were playing in front of 40,000 people. And you're convinced that that's what's going to happen, which it doesn't.
But was it worth it? Probably was still.
Even though you... Brilliant. It gave great stories to tell people like you. Hey.
But you never thought about because what I'm interested too is that you are originally from the UK, right? From Leeds, I think Leeds. You said.
Yep, you've got a good researcher.
So you never thought about when you were all this time in Paris, living there and then traveling. You never thought about going home. Like you never had a big. It seems like you never had a big like love for living in the UK, or am I just kind of projecting something in my mind?
I think you're right. There are several reasons. I mean, this is quite. Well, the first one is simply Margaret Thatcher got in for the 3rd time. She became Prime Minister for the 3rd time.
Who? Say again.
Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, okay.
She's famous as well, like Manu Chao.
No, I know Margaret Thatcher.
She might possibly have influenced world events a little bit more. Sorry, I'm being facetious. I do apologise. So I actually left because I couldn't stand the idea of Conservative government for the 3rd time. And in France at the time, it was a socialist government, and I thought that suits me better. So I moved for political reasons. And once I got to Paris, the thing that struck me was I come from a family of relatively successful people in their different lines of work, and quite kind of heavy, judgmental, that I felt, at least. It's my personal feeling for it. When I got to France, I just sat there and I thought, I can be whoever I want. I can completely reinvent myself. And basically, it took in Paris, if anyone ever moves to Paris, it takes a year to make any friends at all.
Yeah, so the French are.
Yeah, you stick it out for a year, and after a year, it actually becomes really, really nice. But that first year is a struggle. But I just spent that first year saying, who do I want to be? And it was terribly existential. Who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And by the end of the year, I was in the band and thinking, this is so much fun. And ironically, my mother, in fact, is a jazz musician. But she left home when I was 4. So she didn't bring me up. So the jazz music has got nothing to do with my upbringing, because my upbringing was all in literature, which is what my father was doing. But she left home to go and play in the street, to go and play music in the street and become a musician by learning along the way, because she wasn't technically a musician, she was a painter. And I went home and I said, went to see her and I said, I've joined a band and we're playing in the street and I'm playing the double bass. And she went, oh, don't. I went, oh, why not? So get a job as an accountant. You've got an economics degree. You could become an accountant. Like I said, but why? And she said, because it's safe. And I said, but you left home to learn music, playing in the street. Do you regret that decision? She said, not at all. Are you happy? Yep. So why are you telling me not to do it? Insane. Yeah. But it just turns out it's a mother being worried that her son is going to suffer and not be able to make a wonderful life for himself, and that music isn't a career for your own son, even if it's a career for yourself, which is a bit weird. But there you go.
No, that makes sense. No, I know that's how it goes. So then somehow I think the next episode was the TV cartoons. So how does one go from playing in a band on a double bass to doing TV cartoons?
Well, with great difficulty is the answer. It's another kind of weaving story, because basically what happened is everybody else left the band except me. Everyone said, oh, I'm bored, or they all realized we were never going to be stars, I think, and they all left one by one. And I ended up on my own with the bass. The drummer left and went to Czech Republic and is now in Russia and plays avant-garde jazz music, and writes anti-Western pieces for English language Russian papers, which is a bit strange. Another guy moved to the south of France and is now doing voiceovers for video games. And another guy moved to the UK, delivering vegetables as a job, got on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, won a fortune, spent it all, and then moved to Thailand, and is now happily living in Thailand. So basically they all went off because they wanted to do something different. And I kind of thought, well, I'm not going to keep doing this myself, and I'm not going to go and get a proper job, because by that time, how old? I must have been I was 30. At 30, you think, oh, I'm not going to get a proper job now. It's a bit late. So I got kind of part-time work, but luckily my wife had a really good job as a graphic designer. She was, what would you call it? Artistic director for a major French advertising agency. So she made decent money, and we had a child. And she said, basically, if you stay home and look after the child, I'll bring the money. And I went, that's all right by me. So I brought our daughter up for 2 or 3 years. And during that time, I started writing songs for children, which ironically was what we had all said when we were in the band would be a nightmare. Our nightmare audience would be children. And we all laughed about it because we were punks. And as soon as it ended, I thought, actually, I'd quite like to write songs for kids. Kids are all right. So I wrote these songs for the kids, went to the record companies who all knew me because I'd been in the record industry in France for 7 or 8 years. And none of them wanted it. They said, oh, no, we can't use that. Oh, no, not at all, no. And basically, it turns out the music industry for children in France is a mafia.
Oh, wow.
Not a literal mafia, but, you can't get in.
So I mean, you need connections and that kind of thing.
Yeah, much more than the wider world. I mean, it's a niche market, but they sell gazillions of records and make absolutely loads of money, and they won't let you in if you're not part of their club. And it's a very different club to the rock, the rock and pop kind of part of the industry. So I then talked to my wife, and I said, should we? Because she had created. And she and I had created the 2 characters to sing the songs. It wasn't going to be us. It was going to be these 2 characters, a blue dog called Boo-Wah and a yellow koala called Koala. And she was the yellow koala and I was the blue dog. And the idea was the blue dog had this big, deep voice and he was terribly reassuring, would sing in tune all the time. And then the little yellow koala would sing out of tune, out of time, get it wrong. And she would be the kind of child to make the child feel comfortable with a character they could relate to, and then the blue dog bringing both the child and koala forwards in terms of learning and understanding and it was a really, really sweet idea. And I said, well, why don't we make a book? So she took the 12 songs I'd written and she created a story out of them around the world in 12 songs with Buwan Kuala. And then she did all the drawings. We wrote the story together, put the album and the book together, and then went to see the book publishers, thinking if we can get the book publishers to publish it, then we've nailed it. We've got our record out. Turns out they don't want it either because I didn't know anybody. It's less of a mafia, as far as I understand, but they didn't want it because they didn't know who I was. And they just had another 2 boring characters. Don't need them. We've got hundreds of them. Boring, 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 boring. So, you know, it's kind of soul destroying. And then, oh, this is a nice story as well. I was playing one of those awful fantasy football games on internet, and this is 1998.
It was already around. I didn't know.
Oh God, yeah, it was awful. I mean, awful. I played it. I was using a dial-up modem. You know, that funny noise at the beginning each time when you're connecting, and it would connect at like 14K, which is unbelievably slow. And I played this game, and I played it a couple of times and lost. I was kind of down the bottom of the league, and then I figured out basically what their algorithm was doing, and I did 4 at a time, and I won 3 of the 4. And I thought, all right, what have I won? And they said, oh, you got your subscription to these magazines. And so I got the one for football because I like my football. So I got the subscription for the football magazine, subscription for, I can't remember what the second one was. Probably another football magazine. And I thought, I don't want a third one. And the only one I could see that even might be interesting was one about the internet. So I got that. And there was a free copy of Macromedia Flash. And you might not know what it is, but it was Adobe Flash afterwards. Animation software, programming, animation with some program. At the time, it was just animation. So I sat down and I said, right, I'm going to make a website of this. I'm going to do animation, and I'm going to put the songs into an animation form, make stories up. And because there's a very small amount of programming, I'll start programming these games. And at the time, the programming was I mean, Flash 3, there was no programming. Flash 4, they had the start of ActionScript, which was the simplest programming in the world. So I just sat down and I learned it and created a website. So that because the record companies and the publishers didn't want the characters, I thought, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make it a success. I'm going to prove you all wrong because this is really cool. And once again, my wife was making a decent living, so I could afford to do that, which was an immense luxury. And it worked.
So that was like your first, first step into the digital marketing in a way.
Exactly, yeah, because we launched the site, and the first thing I had to do was figure out the search engines. At the time, I mean, the search engines, there was InfoSeek, Hotbot, Magellan, I can't remember the other ones. So there were 15 of them. Excite was another one. Oh, the one with the dog. I can't remember it. Oh, it doesn't matter. And you had to make it. Basically, it was all counting words. It was all down. They didn't even think about links. It was all about what was in the page. And so you would create one page for each keyword and each variant of each keyword for each motor, for each search engine. So there were like 15 search engines, 50 keywords. That would be 10,000 pages you would have to create.
Oh, so that Google wasn't around then, because I think you mentioned somewhere that like your first beginnings was when Google was coming up.
Google was incorporated in September 1998. I launched the website in December 1998 with an animated advent calendar. So September 1998, when they were incorporated, I was building the advent calendar that was then released 3 months later. So I've had a parallel career to Google pretty much. Obviously, I've seen how I've evolved and how they've evolved in parallel in many ways, but they obviously haven't noticed me.
So how did you then go from that moment to then having the, being like a full-on digital nomad, I guess moving at some point to Mauritius, and then getting I guess more involved with the whole like Google and search results and that, like, and never really going back to the normal job market, but like sticking with the gig economy? Like what was the path?
Well, we launched in 1998, and then in mid-1999, a French businessman contacted us and said, I'd like to be part of your project.
Oh, okay.
And we said, great. And at the time, my daughter was ill quite a lot. My wife wasn't happy in her job. And we decided that we needed to get away from Paris. So I said to him, okay, you can come in, but we want to move to the other side of the world. And he said, where? And I said, there. And the idea for me was, at the time, people were saying you can do internet sites from anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter. But nobody was doing it. Everyone's still sitting in the cities doing it. And I thought, right, I'm going to do this. Once again, I don't know how you tête de mule in French. I just want to prove that things can be done. Mauritius is a tiny island just off Madagascar. Desert island, not a desert island, tropical island. We had this vision as a desert island. It's actually very heavily populated for the size. And so we moved there to be in the sun, be next to the sea, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was a really, really nice experience, just from the sense of getting away from Western culture, going to the Southern Hemisphere, learning a different way of life, learning that life isn't quite so stressful as it was in Paris. And there's a really nice story for the beginning of this, is we got a house, and it was just, it was next to a cemetery, the post office, and the sea. It was near the seafront. And the postman came round and said, all right, who are you, basically? And I said, gave him our names, because it's the postman who just kind of, it's not addressed. They don't have postcodes. So it's kind of very manual approach to delivering mail. And I said, oh, but can you tell me what the address is? Because the landlord hasn't actually given us an address. The contract for the house only says, the town. And he said, oh, there isn't really an address for this house. It's Chez Dotman de Villiers. And I said, don't really like that. Can I say between the sea and the post office? And he went, okay. I said, oh, is that my address? And he went, yep. I said, oh, can I change it? Can I change it to between the cemetery and the sea? And he said, nope, you can't change it. You've made your mind up. That's it. The first one you said is the one you're going to get.
Did it really stay away?
It did. Well, what was nice is because we had these characters, Buwa and Kuala, we could tell the audience, the kids. I mean, at this point, we had like 1 million kids a month coming to the site. And we could say to them, send your drawings into Buwa and Kuala. The address is Buwa and Kuala, between the sea and the post office, Mauritius. And their parents must have been going, I'm not sending that. It's like sending it to Santa Claus at the North Pole. It's such a ridiculous address. But the kids were going, yeah, between the sea and the post office, Mauritius, that's completely logical. And it got to us every time. So it was a beautiful kind of piece of bad luck, good luck. I mean, because if I'd chosen the cemetery and the sea, we couldn't have given that to the kids because, But between the sea and the post office is a beautiful little address. Then what happened is basically I got to Mauritius, we set up, and I was going to get developers to help with the code, to build the server, do the MySQL, the databases, run the server, do the coding of the site, do the promotion, do the marketing, do the search engine optimization. My idea was to employ all these people because we now had a businessman on board who was providing some money. It didn't occur to me until I actually turned up there that there weren't any of these qualified people on the island. And when I advertised for people to code, they would say, I know Excel a bit. That's not coding. So I actually had to learn all these skills myself in order to be able to then manage the people who were supposed to be doing the job, so I could actually teach them how to do it a lot of the time. Not all the time, of course.
Because it wasn't the time of remote work. Remote work was not trendy at that point.
And it was 2000 on an island in the middle of nowhere, which hadn't really hooked onto the internet at the time. The internet was awful. So I hadn't calculated all of that. It was just kind of, what a nice idea. This is a good idea. And it's a lot of my life has been about that, like going to see the woman I was in love with in Paris. It's a good idea, and I don't think it through to the end, but I just want to do it because I want to see what's going to happen. It's usually difficult, but it's very rewarding. It's a rewarding way to live. And from an SEO point of view, I was lucky enough to get this guy, the guy who liked Excel. I said, you're not going to be a programmer, but what you can do with Excel is calculate the word ratios for each of the search engines. And then we can build pages and you can write them. So you don't need to code. You're using Excel to calculate the word ratios on an example sample of these pages. And then you can calculate it and then you can write them because you're actually he spoke pretty good English, and he was a semi-marketing guy. And it was really funny. He had the office next to mine, and he literally locked himself away for a month, and we hardly ever saw him. And I never asked him what he was doing. I assumed he was getting on with it. And one day he just came out, it was like, eureka. And he had this sheet of paper with his formula for all the different search engines on it. And he just went through and created them. And the pages, some of them are still, I mean, what I then said to him is, right, okay, we're going to do it in this order of importance. And I started with Google and then went down. And after a couple of months, we realized that Google was the one we were performing best on, and it's the one that brought in the most traffic. So I just said, we can forget about the rest. We're just going to go with Google, which is probably the best decision I could have made. That was in 2002, probably. And so we just forgot about the others. It was a good bet, lucky bet, maybe. And what's interesting is that one of the pages he built in 2002 is still ranking #1 18 years later.
Wow.
Which is astonishing. I mean, hats off to him. I mean, amazing. And that was the art of being an employer in Mauritius, was you don't advertise for a job, or you advertise for a job. People come in and then you look at what they can do and you find them a job to do.
Okay.
And it worked really well. I mean, we ended up with 14 people working for us at one point, and it was basically, I would just create the job around what they were good at. it was a successful way of managing it.
So what are your like big, because then from then on, it's kind of your life looked a bit different in a way that you focus on then the brand SERP and the digital marketing.
Oh, right. Sorry, just there's a big hole there. Sorry, just to interrupt you. If you come back a bit, in fact, at one point, ITV International approached us and said, can we make a cartoon? We have 5 million visits a month on the site. 100 million page views a month. It was a phenomenal success. We were 10,000th biggest site in the world.
Oh,
and
wow.
We were only for kids up to 10 years old. I mean, we were competing with PBS and Disney and the BBC. I mean, it's insane what we were doing. And then ITV said, oh, we'd like to make a TV series. And we ended up making a TV series, 52 episodes, Buan Kuala. It showed in 25 countries in the end. We did it in French and English. And that was really, really, really enjoyable. So kind of it went from the website to the TV series, and the whole thing collapsed due to an argument with the business partner, which is terribly unfortunate.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to ask how it ended, but like as often happens, some kind of argument.
Yeah, sorry. I got so into it that I became the blue dog. I mean, I think somewhere in my mind, I went a bit mad, I think, about halfway through. And one day we had these guys, it was amazing. This guy who did these animations, astonishingly talented chap. He left school at 16, no qualifications, came in for an interview. And we were looking for people to help my wife with drawings and illustrations and animations. And I said to her, well, I don't know how to choose them. She said, well, I'm not coming in. So what I did, I interviewed them and I got them to draw a copy of one of her characters. And then I took them back and I went, right, I've got 10 drawings for you. I know which one you're going to pick because it's the best one. And I presented it to her and she went, nope. And she went through and then she picked the worst one. What are you doing? It doesn't look anything like it. And she said, but he's got a soul. This guy's got a soul. And he's going to take the characters further than I would. So I employed him. And turns out she was right. He was absolutely brilliant. And one day he did this animation of the blue dog walking across the screen. And I looked at it and I thought, he was actually kind of like this, looking really happy. It was amazing. And I said to him, that's an amazing animation. How did you manage to do that? That's astonishing. He said, no, I just watch you every day. He just basically, the blue dog was me. And that became the problem, is that I would see in this blue dog myself. And I would become blue dog, and I was with a business partner who was obviously just out to make loads of money. I was there to be the blue dog and share this glorious, wonderful content with happiness and joy with the world, children. So I got completely shafted.
I see. So what are your, like, from that part of life, which is kind of crazy? I mean, many different things you did and, many stories and stuff. Like, are there some like biggest takeaways from you from all those, like, kind of from doing the music, playing in a band to then
yeah, well, dare to dream you'll be a rock star, because that allows you to actually stick through 6 years of driving 100,000 kilometers a year with people you don't even like, who burp and fart in the van. Believe that what you're doing is good. Make it as good as you possibly can. Don't be pretentious. Try and take a step back and say, actually, is it as good as I think? Can I make it better? Be self-critical without putting yourself down. Don't say this isn't good. Say this isn't as good as it could be, and here's how I can make it better. And that's basically when we were doing Buwan Kuala, how we progressed. And if you look at the site, which is actually still online, you can find it, Buwan Kuala up to 10.com. And if you look at the very first ones, 12 around the world with Buwan Kuala, you'll see the quality. I mean, you can feel that it's nice, but you can see the quality isn't there. And you get to the end and the quality is astonishing. I mean, we had a team, so it's not just me, but it was me, my wife, these guys doing the animations, some guy doing the sound as well, another guy helping out with the music. But when it was rejected twice, or in two different contexts, and I created the third context, we had to fight for 2 years to get it accepted by anybody, and then another 4 years to get anywhere near making any money, and then another 2 years to get ITV International to make the TV series. Perseverance. Stick it. I mean, if you really, really believe in it, stick with it. But obviously it's dangerous because you can stick with something that just isn't going to work. But if you have some talent and you persevere and you keep banging away, it will end up bringing something. So obviously you need the talent to start with, but it's the perseverance that makes it happen. If you've got talent but you don't persevere, you won't get anywhere, as a rule.
Yeah, it's like a multiplier. Talent multiplied by perseverance, and you might actually get somewhere.
Yeah, add a bit of luck in, you're away. Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, true. And what about the whole like gig economy? Like you never, I guess you had enough success to never really, I guess, probably think about, going back to like the typical life of, going back to UK or somewhere else, getting a job or something like that. I guess you just got enough like success in the kind of in the middle to never think about it, or you thought about it but just never happened?
No, well, I've always thought, I actually did start a job once, so I'm kind of, but it was a trial period, 3 months, and after 3 months, I'm never doing this again. I had a weird boss. She was lovely actually, but she was mad. I worked for 3 months, and I never saw her wear the same outfit twice. And we lived in Paris, and she must have had a tiny flat. How did she do it? I've been wondering that for 35 years. But after that, basically it was a gig job, just in the sense that it was only 3 months, and I didn't intend to stay even after the first kind of few days. But that was a real memory for me that I refer back to say I mean, she was nice, she was a lovely person. I just don't want to be in that situation. It doesn't suit me. I'm not very good at it. So no, I've never thought about that. I was thinking, where can I go next? What can I do next? But there are a couple of things. One is I'm now probably too old. And the other is being in the gig economy, I have every advantage that makes it, or made it easy for me to make that choice, because I could always fall back on the advantages I have, which is white male, English speaking, well educated, tall, good looking, quite bulky, nice deep voice. People have confidence in somebody with a deep voice. I've got every advantage possible. If I'd been a woman, or if I'd been small, or if I'd had a tiny little voice like that, I wouldn't have had the courage, because I wouldn't have had the fallback option. And I think that's really important to remember, is that knowing you've got the fallback option makes it much easier. So I think I had it relatively easy.
So it's like calculated risk in a way.
Yeah, I've got a degree in economics. I mean, I could fall back on becoming an accountant. It's probably too late to be an accountant now, because you've got to be, I'm not. So I always say rude things about accountants, and I regret it immediately afterwards. But I've never thought about it. Honestly, with COVID, it's the first time I've thought, I don't have a pension. Oh dear. So the gig economy has this big advantage. When you get to my age, 54, and COVID comes along, I mean, 54, fine. I might have started worrying about it anyway, but COVID, you kind of think, crumbs, things can change very quickly. You can become incapacitated very quickly, very suddenly. Then the whole thing goes out the window. What do I do then?
I think at this point, you're probably in your life, I mean, just listening to you and reading about you and kind of seeing what you've done, I can imagine that you've got not so many, but like enough skills to just figure something out. Like at this point, you learn, you did so many things, you had to figure so many things out, solve so many problems and learn so many like different skills in different areas, that I think if like push comes to shove, you can just basically, do so many things that you always kind of survive, I think. I mean, that from my point of view.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And the other thing is, I mean, as you say, I learn things with relative ease. I'm not going to say easily, but so kind of just saying, oh, I'm going to do that. I mean, I actually picked up a thing called Doodly. They've got these awful salesy ads on YouTube, but I kind of thought, yeah, okay, why don't I give Doodly a go? Because I've got illustrations, which my wife does, my ex-wife does. And I've got these videos that I'm making. I've got a green screen set up just over here. So I can record green screen videos, put animations behind it, but I can't do animations and I can't afford to pay somebody to do them for me. So I picked up Doodly, started working on it, and it took me literally a day to do some actually pretty good animations. And you'll see them on my Twitter feed, and I'll be releasing them soon. And it's obviously Doodly's a great platform for it, but because I've done so many of these things in the past, picked up Flash and learned it, picked up MySQL, PHP, is that kind of, you just kind of think, I've just got to get into the head of the person who developed this, figure out how they've been approaching it, what's logical for this kind of software, and you can get your head around it quite quickly. What took me longest was figuring out, because I've got these pre-drawn illustrations and I have to get the hand, because it's a Doodly hand that goes like that, and I had to get the hand to actually look like it was drawing all the different elements. That was the hardest thing of the lot. All the rest of it is really easy. And I'm not an affiliate of Doodly at all. And I don't even like them because they've got a horrible sales pitch. But the product is actually pretty good. And it's made my animation skills. It's taken my animation skills from 0 to about here. So all part
That's pretty good.
Well. No.
It depends where is the the top.
Well, if we say Disney, we'll say Disney's here because it's top of the screen. In fact, I'm still here, but it's good enough for YouTube. So I mean, and it's quick and it's easy. But I think the point you're trying to make, yes, is I could segue into a different career if I needed to. But I think, and what I've done is, now we can talk about brand SERPs.
But before we get there, can we just talk about one more thing? Like, I think because you touched on a couple of times on learning, and I think this is, I think you have something to say there for sure, because it seems like you mentioned twice the ones that you kind of have an ease to learning, but also I think you mentioned once that you always feel like you can learn anything. Do you know where that comes from? That you would always like go into something, you wouldn't know anything about it, and you would be like, oh, I can figure it out, I can learn it, and I can become good at it. Because I think a lot of people don't have that, and you started a lot of things from scratch. So I think you have to have some like secret sauce there.
That's a great question, actually, because in fact, when I was 16, I mean, in the UK, you do exams at 16.
You do what at 16?
You do exams.
Okay, exam. Yeah, at 16.
You do them at 11. And it's called the 11 plus, or it was at the time. And if you get really good marks, you can go to a really posh school, a really good school. If you get bad marks, you go to a really bad school. And I was on the cusp. I almost got the good marks, but I didn't get them. So I went to the really crap school. Then at 16, you do exams. And I failed almost all of them. I went from being one of the brightest kids in the class to being one of the stupidest kids in the class, or the least successful, let's say. And then I scraped through my levels, and then the economics degree, basically I did economics because for me it was the easiest subject I could find. I found it easier than the other ones. And so my educational career, I've got a degree, so obviously it's not a failure, but it wasn't what it should have been. And I think that's encouraging for anybody, just in the sense that academic qualifications aren't everything. Your perseverance and your desire to learn a great deal in that, and your capacity to, and it's having a flexible brain. I was talking to a guy called David Amerland, who's an absolute lovely chap and a genius person about analyzing how we think and how we work in our brains. And we were talking about people with flexible brains and people without flexible brains. Narcissists don't have flexible brains. People with empathy do have flexible brains. I mean, obviously that's not the only distinction, but it's a good way of looking at it, because we had a guy in the band who, bit of a narcissist, he couldn't learn to play the guitar. He would play every day 3 hours, and after 4 years, he was still as crap as he was at the start.
Open mind, no?
Yeah, open mind, that's a good word. And it comes to, he couldn't understand that simply by practicing and practicing and practicing, he didn't get any better. So when I say persevere, I mean persevere if you've got any semblance of talent. And persevere if you're willing to learn and adapt, and keep that open mind. Be empathetic. I mean, I said earlier on about the software I'm using. I was trying to understand how they would be looking at it. That's being empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
It's understanding their point of view. And that helped me get to the point where I could get something decent out of their software very quickly. Because I wasn't thinking, what would I do? I was thinking, what would they do to make this easy for me?
And who injected that in you? Like, what did it just come somehow naturally through different
It was the Blue Dog.
Say again?
It was the Blue Dog.
Oh, the Blue Dog.
The Blue Dog, as I said, I became the Blue Dog. The Blue Dog was this incredibly nice, kind, empathetic character with a big, deep voice. I mean, a little story with that is that I started the voice and I thought my voice needed to be a little bit lower, so I took it down 2 semitones. So everything I sang and everything I said was down 2 semitones, which makes it slightly deeper. And having done that for 4 or 5 years, I realized that my voice now is the same as the adapted voice that I'd made. So my voice adapted to the character, my character adapted to the character. I became more empathetic, more caring. I now say thank you incessantly, whereas I didn't before, because the Blue Dog's role was to be polite. Please, thank you, lovely to see you, absolutely delightful. And smiling and being chirpy and cheerful all the time. Because the voice was so low, I had to be excessively cheerful all the time. And that rubbed off on my character as well. And then if we come back to the Mauritius thing, is when I couldn't find a PHP developer or a MySQL developer, I bought a book on Amazon, got it delivered to the house, read the book over the weekend, went in on the Monday and said to the developers, right, who didn't specialize in that, but you know, I did have developers, and said, right, here's how we're going to approach it. You need to read that chapter, that chapter, that chapter, and then you're going to put this into operation. So it was by necessity, because the coding, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So it was kind of, it's a mixture of, it was necessity to actually get things to move forward in a situation where if I didn't do it, nothing would happen. And everybody was relying on me to make it happen. So responsibility, necessity, and then being empathetic, because I needed to be empathetic to what, in the case of the software, how they're trying to approach it, but empathetic also to the people I was asking to do things, into what could they do and what couldn't they do, what would demotivate them if it didn't work out, so on and so forth. So I like what you said about being open-minded. If you're open-minded, and that's the other thing, and I said it earlier on about be critical of yourself. Don't criticize yourself. Look for where things could be better. This isn't as good as it could be. Don't ever say it's not good enough. It's not as good as it could be. And then you just keep moving. It sounds terribly American and Ted, but that idea, I mean, with the talks I give and the conferences I give and the podcasts, I listen back and I watch back and I think, where could I have made this a little bit better? And so it goes for performing as well. It goes with playing the double bass. It goes with being on stage, giving a show. I mean, when you're on stage playing the double bass, you're playing the double bass, you're singing, you're remembering the words, you're remembering the song, you're remembering the structure, and you're giving a show to the audience, so that there's a connection with them. You can't just play I can't just play the music and expect people to go, oh, great. That would be let's say, a dull jazz concert where people just admire how good you are, and I wasn't good enough to do that. So I would make a show so that people would get into the show and think, wow, this is cool, and I feel part of this show. Empathy again.
Yeah, empathy. Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're just like developed a really good way with people. Like, you know how to be with people, talk with people, be empathetic with people, like throughout the years and experiences.
Well, I had an interesting comment from my ex-girlfriend who said, basically, she's seen me working. She's seen me with one bunch of people. She's seen me with another bunch of people. She's seen me with the people I work with. And she's going to be the same everywhere. I mean, this is just me. It's not even kind of me trying to be nice to people or trying to be something that I'm not. I'm like this with my clients. I will say the same stupid things I'm saying to you that I will say it to my clients. So I can't be any other way, and I lose clients because they think, oh no, he's not very professional, but that's fine by me because I wouldn't enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. And also one last thing, I think one thing that stood out to me is that you, and this is I think what separates most people who, end up kind of getting something done in life, like maybe not achieving success, because success is has different definitions for everyone, but
Brilliant.
like kind of accomplishing some interesting things, and kind of going their own way, and succeeding in some way, is that you have this mindset of like looking for solutions rather than problems. Like
That's nice,
you don't look like where there's like half of the people, or even more, I feel like even more, like when they have a problem or something happens or there's an obstacle, they immediately start looking at like, oh, why is this bad? Oh, it's horrible,
yeah.
I can't do. And they just kind of list out all that's wrong with it, instead of immediately switching to, okay, this happened, it's like there's nothing to do about it, like how can I solve this? And I think
Oh, sorry, I interrupt there, but that comes back to playing the double bass. The guy told me, when you make the mistake, put it behind you and look forwards. And it's exactly that same idea. It's saying there was a barrier, but it's now behind me. Let's move forward. Sorry, I interrupted.
no, that's perfect. Okay, so it comes from somewhere around that time, but it's
Well, I think
stuck with you.
it's a accumulation, but I think learning to play double bass, because I really, really wanted to be in the band. I mean, it was really something I really, 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 really wanted. And I was willing to put myself through a month of very hard work learning the double bass. I didn't have a job. Well, I didn't work. I just worked on double bass, and I took the risk. And I worked and I worked and I worked, and I really wanted it. And that taught me that you can kind of make these drastic decisions, and it can work out and it can fail as well. And then you take the Kids album later on, I made that drastic decision and it completely failed. Then we did the book and it completely failed. Then I did the third attempt and it was the website and it succeeded, but it succeeded after 4 years.
So you
once
also
again,
had to fall in love with the process, like.
Brilliant. Oh, and that is the thing, is I wake up every morning thinking, ooh, what am I going to do today? Which actually makes life much, much easier. And that's the great thing about the gig economy, or at least the being a freelancer or making your own decisions. You decide. There's always going to be something you don't want to do. And you've always got to do it. You can't just put all the stuff you don't like to one side and just do the stuff you like. But if the overall project is something you're excited about, even the boring stuff is nice.
Yeah.
Nice, okay. And one of the other things I did when I had these people working in Mauritius is that I had meetings and I would say to them, 50% of your job has to be enjoyable.
Oh.
If less than 50% of your job is enjoyable, come to me, tell me what isn't enjoyable, and we'll try and figure out a way to get that out of your work so that 50%, or at least 50%, is stuff you actually enjoy doing and you're pleased to come to work to do it.
Where that 50% came from? Was it just something you you just came up with?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of figure if I'm doing 2 hours of work and what I do, the first hour is so boring, but I think, but the next hour is going to be really nice. Then I can do the 2 hours of work. And there's no reason it's 50%. It worked for me. But what actually happened is people would come to see me and they would say, okay, I don't like sending this email. It's always the same. And I said, okay, we'll write a script so you can click on a button. It sends the email for you. So that gets rid of half your work. Now, what do you want to do with the other half? And they would suggest and we'd agree. And then they'd end up with a new partial job description. That was a lot of fun and it worked really well.
That's a good advice. Hope people are taking notes.
Yeah, sorry, no, but it's also empathy, because I'm thinking, how are they feeling about doing their job? I mean, I'm telling you to do all this stuff. And it breaks my heart it makes me feel a bit annoyed when somebody 22 years old comes and says, oh, I don't want to do that, it's boring. You go, we all have to do boring things sometimes. The art of the thing is to understand that the boring stuff goes with the interesting stuff. I mean, even today, I'm doing my own project and I love my project, but half of my work is boring. Half of my work is stuff I don't really want to do, but the project interests me. And the other half is really interesting. Like this part is really cool. I consider this to be part of my job because My job is brand SERPs, and you said it right at the beginning. So the job for today, in inverted commas, is done. We've got the message across that what appears when somebody Googles your brand name is incredibly important to your business.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. Just
Yeah, that was a bit pushy, wasn't it? I do apologize.
No. I had this in mind anyway, but I just wanted to say that yeah, I feel like this is one big problem, but I think there's a few reasons for it. It's hard to pinpoint one, like social media, all these things that we kind of glorify the success and also the doing the cool things that you want to do, but a lot of people don't show a lot of the grind, the freelancers or entrepreneurs or people who have their own business and stuff, they don't show that what really goes behind the scenes, that they in fact do a lot of things they don't want to. Still, eventually you can design your life and everything that way that you minimize amount, but you still have to do like quite a big part of it. But as you said, if you have a bigger project or bigger goal or bigger like vision, then doing some small thing that you don't like then becomes bearable. It's hard when you like work in some corporate job that you hate and there's no like really vision for where you can get, and everything sucks. Then like, yeah, obviously that's
yeah. Well, I mean, and that's probably why, if we come back to the question of beginning, why I always stayed in the gig economy, is because I couldn't stand being in something in a corporate job where I could hate it and it goes around in circles. And the other thing is the people above me, the people I work with. I'm a nice enough guy and I'm empathetic enough and I get on with most people. But you're saying I don't want to be forced to always work with the same people.
Mm-hmm.
And that variety is also perhaps something, listening to other people, getting feedback from other people, from a wide range of people, also helps with that learning process.
Yeah, definitely. That's a
and
good point.
with the different, I mean, the number of clients I've had, the number of people I've worked with, the number of projects I've worked on, it's a phenomenal variety. And I think that if we're going to say like, how do you learn to learn? It's take a step back, be empathetic to what you're trying to do, or be realistic to what you're trying to do, and empathetic to the people and the tools that are going to help you get there. And do as many different projects as you can, because that variety of projects is going to help you to understand how you can better learn stuff. And one thing I did, in fact, for making the TV series, the film director who made the TV series, who was the director, they actually put me as part of the team, so I co-directed it. And I bought a book from Amazon, got it delivered, about how to make a TV show. And I read it, and it taught me a lot. But what I realized as I was reading is that I don't have to remember all this. Mm-hmm. All I have to do is remember where I saw the information.
Yeah.
And then flip through it when I need the information. I need to know that it's there and I need to know where it was. And that's another nice trick, is you don't have to remember everything. You just have to remember where it is.
Yeah, especially now with the accessibility of information. Yeah. Like you can just, take your phone out or something.
Well, I think a lot of the intelligence from my youth was remembering things wrote, like a list of all the economists from the 20th century, or remembering what Patrick Minford said about this, that, and the other in 1996, and Margaret Thatcher. Anyway, and the dates that these people came to power, or the dates that Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were in some kind of awful world-dominating meeting that killed the world in 1986. But I don't need to remember that anymore, because if I remember it was in 1986 and it was Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan and that it was about nuclear power, look it up on Google and we're away. We don't need today the memory we needed yesterday. What we need is a capacity to remember where the information was, and then a capacity to use that information. Now that's what I call smart intelligence. It's applied intelligence. It's using your intelligence to actually move the needle. And that's great. What an opportunity that's going to be, or it is.
Yeah, and for sure, I think you mentioned that traveling helped, at least from my point of view, probably helped you big time with having that kind of, also developing that empathy, and also kind of this being able to step back, because you had to go into different cultures. Then you traveled, you did conferences in many places, so probably that also gave you like a different perspective. At least it did to me. So I imagine for you it could be similar.
Yeah, I mean, the more varied your horizons, the better you're going to perform, in my opinion. I mean, I think also somebody who tends to go towards that varied horizon, like you do, like I do, is going to be somebody who's more open-minded and is therefore going to learn more easily, in inverted commas. And somebody who tends to stay in the same thing. I would use the example of accountant, but I get shouted at again, not by you. I keep using it.
Accountants probably don't watch this podcast or are not gonna watch this, and if they do, maybe they will take it like
Right.
lightly.
Well, I've actually got a friend who did really well at school, and he got a first at Cambridge in statistics and complicated maths stuff. And he pushed through with the education that I didn't bother pushing through with. And he was my best friend at the time as a kid. And I met him again 5-6 years ago. And he's an actuary. And we were sitting in the pub.
He's
and I
a
said,
who?
Actuary.
Actuary. What's
Yeah,
that?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I said, that was we can repeat the conversation. And he said, I don't really know. You've been doing it for 30 years. And he said, well, actually, I sit in an office in an insurance agency, in a big insurance company. And my boss sends me calculations that I have to check that they're right. And then I send them back when I check that they're right, or I've corrected them if he's made a mistake. And I said, well, what do these calculations do? He said, oh, I don't know. It's something to do with calculating insurance risk. So he's a tiny cog in a really big machine. And all he's being used for is that capacity of his to write complicated maths formulas. And he is so bored with his job. It's phenomenal how much he hates his job. And that's the thing, is he does one thing and he does it incredibly well, but he doesn't have the horizons and he doesn't have an open view. And he's a lovely, lovely guy. And I mean, I wouldn't say he's not open-minded because he goes mountain climbing. So he's obviously, I think he goes to the top of the mountain so he can go like that at the top of the mountain, as opposed to being in his office, which I can appreciate. But he got stuck in that. And I don't think it's his natural habitat, as it were. But then once you get stuck in it, you're kind of going down this thing and you're thinking, well, that's all I'm ever going to do.
Yeah, and your vision like narrows, and then it's so narrow you can't see anything else.
Yeah.
But speaking of boring, and then we can transition now into your kind of area of more expertise.
A brilliant transition. The boring topic of brand SERPs, is that what you're saying?
No, I wanted to, my question is, but it's actually part of the question, is that, kind of looking on the outside, it's very interesting for me that someone with your history of what you did, this, playing in a band, creating cartoons, and then living on Mauritius, would finally go into something like brand SERP and digital marketing,
right,
and focus on search results on Google. So maybe you can intro us, like what what are we missing from the story?
Right.
Like what got you so interested, and what got you to stick with it for so long? Because how long have you been doing it already?
Well, I mean, I started with Buon Koala in 1998, specs off for Buon Koala in 1988. Then it all collapsed in 2008, and I was stuck in Mauritius. I got the company taken away from me. I lost all my income. I lost the characters. I lost the company. It was a complete disaster. And I was in Mauritius with no money, and I had to find a way to make money quickly. And so I pitched online to people saying, I built this website up. Look at it. It's 10,000 biggest site in the world. If you want to help with your SEO, I'm your man. And I got some work doing that and started working in SEO because it was the most saleable thing I had. Because I had the site. I mean, I could have said, I make these great animations, but then it's a lot to do with people's taste. They go, I don't like the animation. So, and I couldn't do it on my own because I would have needed the team. Or I could say, I write songs. And I was going, we don't want you to write songs. We're not going to pay you to write songs. But if I said, I can push Google traffic to your site, everyone will go, oh, I can see that. That's good. Make money, so we'll pay you. And so it was actually simply a way to make money in the short term when everything went pear-shaped in Mauritius. And then after a couple of years, managed to move back to France, got the money together to move back to France. And when I turned up in France, because in Mauritius it was all remote work, I was pitching to people in the UK. All my clients were in the UK. So I never had to go and see them. And I never really thought about how to sell to people. And then I came to Paris and started pitching to people. And I was thinking, oh, I'll just pitching online. And I thought, well, I'll get the work. And they said, no, you've got to come into our offices and actually meet us. So I would go to the offices and I would talk to them and I'd go, blah, 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 and I'd be really excited. I'd be going, this is going to be really great. We're going to do this. We're going to get this content in place and we're going to make these amazing structured sites that are going to wow Google, and we're going to bring this traffic in and we're going to get qualified traffic and they're going to buy your products. You're going to convert and wow. And they'd be going, yeah. And you have this kind of thing going. And I'm exaggerating. It wasn't like that, but
but you had great energy.
Yeah, I mean, I would have this great energy. I think that's the point, rather than what I was saying. And people would go, "Yeah, I believe in this guy. He's got this energy, and I'm sure he's going to get us there." And I would walk out, and I would convert, let's say, 50%. And then one day I looked my own name up, and I went into Google, and I looked it up, and I thought, actually, it says, Jason Barnard is a blue dog. It doesn't say Jason Barnard's an expert in digital marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I then thought, if I can make it show what I want it to show, and I can make it impressive for my job, for the thing I've just pitched for, when people search my name, they will think this is the seal on the deal. And it's true. I spent two years maybe working to get that brand search engine results page, what appears when people search my name, so that it shows Jason Barnard, my site right at the top, and then Search Engine Journal, SEMrush, big companies, big platforms, respected in the industry, videos from YouTube, all about digital marketing. And then I've got the knowledge panel on the right-hand side that says Jason Barnard used to be a blue dog, he used to be in a band. So it tells my story, which it should, because the brand SERP is supposed to represent you as a person in the case of a person, or you as a brand in the case of a brand, or you as a music group if it's a music group SERP, search engine results page. But it shows people who were searching my name at the time, who I was pitching to, or in fact today when I'm pitching to people, they search my name. And they search my name and they say, he's an expert because he writes for Search Engine Journal, he's on SEMrush all the time, he's got these great videos on all these great channels. And it validates who I've been saying I am. And my conversion rate, let's say it was 50%, now 80%.
Wow.
People don't argue about my prices anymore. They say, oh, he's the brand SERP guy and he's impressive in digital marketing, but I'm still a blue dog, and you can still see I'm a blue dog. And that's now funny and interesting. It's a quirk that people like, but it hasn't taken over the brand SERP, which it did before. So what it comes down to is when I was pitching to people, they would then look me up online afterwards. And when what came up was impressive, they bought into the project.
So that was the inspiration to go into that direction later, and just
and well, in fact, I did it for 2 years, and I thought, well, actually, I honestly thought this will take me a few months to sort out, and it did. I did okay in a few months with my super duper SEO skills. Then after a couple of years, I thought, actually, we can get better and better, and I can control it more and more, and I can use Google as a CMS. Somebody said that to me a few weeks ago. Google is Jason Barnard's CMS.
CMS, that's content
management system.
Right. Yeah.
Because what appears is pretty much what I want. I'm writing my own Google page. And that's one extreme. But the point for me is that I thought it would take me a couple of years to master it once I decided I was going to figure it out. And it's 7 years later, and every single day I learn something new. There hasn't been a day gone by in the last 7 years when I haven't looked at a brand SERP and thought, yeah, hadn't thought of that.
Is that what keeps you going with it? Like the fact that it's like this kind of ongoing quest and that can never be complete?
Well, yeah, I mean, it used to be perfecting my own. Then it was some clients asked me to help them with theirs, especially clients with problems. If you've got a bad review or a competitor ranking on your website, on your brand SERP. So I can help with that kind of thing. But that's not the work I prefer. I mean, I like the idea, if you control your brand SERP, then what appears when somebody Googles your name becomes easier to manage over the long term. So if there is bad press or bad reviews, they're much less likely to come up to that first page. And if they do, they're much more easy to get rid of. So it's kind of, I'm into the idea of proactive management. Control it today so that in the future you don't have these problems. And that doesn't really sell very well because people don't get it until they have a problem, which is unfortunate. But the reason I'm so enthusiastic, there's several reasons, one of which is every single day I learn something new. And I keep saying to people, oh, rich site links, there's an average of 5 rich site links on brand SERPs. And people go, I don't care. You go, ah, but you will, honest. And it is that thing is, I'm sure this is a great path to be on. And I'm now obsessed by the idea of convincing everybody else to jump on the bandwagon and be on this path with me, because it's great and it's fun and it's enjoyable and it's interesting. And the other is that the other thing that's really getting me excited is that I've got a collection. I collect brand SERPs. I've got 70,000 brands and people, and I'm tracking these brand SERPs every single month. So I see not only I've got 10 million brand SERPs in a database. So I've been looking at these, and you look at them and you're going, okay, what can I understand from here? And just by looking at them, I have in my brain a picture that nobody else has got. Mm-hmm. I find that really interesting. You see, I can now look at a brand SERP and I say that, and it takes me about 3 seconds. Whereas 7 years ago, I wouldn't have known. 2 years ago, it would have taken me hours and hours and hours and hours. So it's that kind of ongoing appreciation, artistic appreciation, perhaps somewhere down the line, of brand SERPs that I'm developing, that I can feel, and it feels really nice and it's fun. And also the statistics, because I did economics, I did statistical analysis. I sort through the database and figure out how many blue links there are on a brand SERP, how many video boxes do you get on a brand SERP, what do you find in knowledge panels, how many site links do you get, all of these things that are on Google's results page, the richer results. How much does YouTube dominate video boxes when you see them on Google SERPs? 68%. It's lower than you would think. There's an awful lot of news sites. There's an awful lot of Twitter. There's an awful lot of Facebook. When do they come up? When don't they come up? When should you rely on YouTube for your videos? When should you not rely on YouTube for your videos in that context? All of that is phenomenally interesting. And every day I find something that I didn't expect. And the third one is when I talk to people about it, they say, oh, brand SERPs, that's really boring. And then I talk to them about it for 10 minutes. They go, oh, wow, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And I love that.
It's not what you talk about, it's how you talk about it, right?
Yeah, but I'd like also to think that brand SERPs are actually interesting, but I do appreciate that they're only interesting as long as I'm talking about them enthusiastically.
No, I mean, like for me, for someone who knows about digital marketing and some different pieces there, and the obvious question that rises, and I guess it's going to be useful for people watching and listening, is like, so, like the big one known is SEO. Like that's like the good old thing that's been there and now has fallen out of trend, but used to have golden days. So like, what's in a nutshell, what would you say is the difference between like generally SEO, like, some marketing agencies or whatever teams just, focusing on, hey, we will help with your SEO, versus a brand SERP? Because for me, it seems like it's very much similar, but probably in your eyes, it's totally different, or maybe it isn't. So I'm just curious, like how you look at it.
You just asked me the best question. I was trying not to interrupt you because I wanted to get answering it straight away, because it's a great question. I love it. Number one is SEO isn't difficult. It's really quite simple, but because of the number of things you need to deal with, the number of parameters you need to be looking at, it becomes very complicated very quickly when you're looking at the overall picture. But if you look at a brand SERP, it's very focused. It's a controlled environment about your brand. Mm-hmm. And you can control it relatively easily using very simple SEO tactics, but they're the exact same SEO tactics you would use everywhere else. So that's a really good way to learn SEO. Because if I change my meta title on my homepage on my site, which is ranking number 1, Google then crawls it and it changes in the SERP pretty much immediately. So I can see how it affects. I don't need to wait and I don't need to extrapolate. I can see exactly what it's done. And then if I try and change the site links that go underneath, you've got the homepage and then you've got blue links underneath, all coming from that same brand site. I can try and get those to swap around, try and change how Google's presenting them. That's a fairly simple SEO technique that actually helps with all the rest of your SEO as well. And it gives you an insight into how you should be working the rest of your SEO. If you look at the knowledge panel, if you want a knowledge panel, it's about informing Google. It's about educating Google. And that's what SEO is. It's packaging your content for Google and informing Google about what you're talking about, what you're offering its users, why you're the most credible, or that you are the most credible. and that you have the content it needs to deliver to its users. That's all SEO is. And brand SERPs is all about Google will show to your users, your audience, the content that it thinks is the most valuable to them.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that you can push anything you want onto your brand SERP if you can package it in a way that demonstrates to Google that it's valuable to your audience.
Mm.
So it's basically, if I want video boxes, Twitter boxes, image boxes, podcast boxes, blue links, descriptions, knowledge panels, whatever you want, every single one of those elements can be affected by SEO. Every single one of those elements can be brought onto the brand SERP. And every one of those, bringing those elements onto your brand SERP is using simple SEO tactics that you don't even need to be a developer to do. So it's a really simple entry into understanding SEO and understanding modern SEO, which isn't the complex technical jungle that it used to be.
Oh,
It's
really?
about, no.
Because a lot of people, just to kind of interrupt you slightly, because maybe you have a really good take there, is that a lot of people, I think, when you now mention the name SEO, people think like, oh, it's, you know, this thing that's like super complex on one hand. Two, the rules of the game change a lot, so it's very much like you're not in control, and then it's very like it's not sexy, and it's takes a lot of time. So these are like the objections that I hear from people now. So like, what would you say to those things?
I would say all of that was true 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Not anymore. The thing is, Google's algorithms are no longer written by human beings. They're written by machines. What the human beings do is they say to the machines, this is all machine learning. It's basically a machine trying to understand how to achieve a goal that a human being has set it.
Mm-hmm.
So what the human being says is, I want the perfect SERP. I want this SERP to serve this purpose. There you go. You've got to get to their machine, and they give the machine examples of what they consider to be good results. Then they give the machine all the data and they say, figure it out for everything else. So that means that those rules you were talking about no longer exist as such, because nobody in the world knows what they are. Only the machine knows what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because the human being is simply telling the machine, get to that result. And then when the machine's been working on it for a bit and it started producing these results, and it's going, now what do you think? The machine, I'm being a machine here. What do you think of my results? And then the human being, Google, will then say, okay, this is right, that's wrong, that's right, that's right, that's wrong, that's right, that's good, almost right, that's good, that's bad, blah, blah, blah. And they do that by using human beings to rate the quality of the results of Google.
Mm-hmm.
And they use feedback from users on Google, and they use data from the SERPs themselves, i.e. how users interact with the SERPs, the results pages. So they then say to the machine, this worked, this didn't. This worked, this didn't. And then the machine goes back and tries to do it again with that new information about what was good and what was bad about what it had done. So every single thing that it takes into consideration is something the machine decides about, and not the human being. Not every single, pretty much everything.
And why that makes it better?
Because then you can't say to anybody, oh, I need more links, oh, I need more structured data, oh, I need more text, oh, I need more of this or more of that, because nobody knows what the real answer is. But what you can do is say, Google will keep feeding this machine mistake, 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 as long as the results don't satisfy its users. And it will keep feeding that machine, great, 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 patting it on the head saying what a great machine you are every time it does satisfy the user. So what they're doing is Google people are saying, this is a good result because it brings the solution to the user efficiently and quickly. The best result, the best solution.
So then the main idea is to focus on the user then.
And that's what Google's saying. People are getting really frustrated with them, saying, oh yeah, you just tell us how many links we need, because that's what we're used to in the SEO community. And Google is saying, but you just have to satisfy the user. And they're not doing it because they're horrible people. They're doing it because that's what they're telling the machine. So they don't know what you need to do on a detail by detail basis. And every single result page is going to be different. So they can't tell you what you need to do for your particular case. So at the end of the day, you need to make sure that this machine that's judging you, basically what Google is saying is, we have our users who are expressing a problem or asking a question, and we want to bring the best solution or the best answer as quickly as and efficiently as we possibly can. That's their aim.
Yeah.
That's it. So the number one result, the one that they put in front of the user, has to be the best result with the most efficient and qualitatively great, satisfying solution for their user. If you start with that, you're going, okay, that's what they're aiming to do. Now they're saying to the machine, you need to get us that result.
Mm-hmm.
And that machine needs to understand what it is you're offering. It needs to understand exactly what solution you're offering to whom. So it needs to understand who you are, what you do, and who your audience is. Then, if it's understood you and your competitor, it's saying, well, which one do I put first? Because I've got two that are pretty much the same. Then you say, okay, now you need to identify, or sorry, you need to convince it that you are the most credible out of those two solutions. So that would be reviews, inbound links, user-generated content on your page, i.e. interaction with users who actually find your content interesting and useful, and it creates discussion, or influencers linking to you, all these things that kind of make your content look credible. I use the word credible. Google used the word expertise, authority, and trust. Just think credible. It needs to look credible, more credible than my competition. So you've got it to understand what you're offering. You've got it to understand that you're a more credible solution to its user's problem, or a better answer to their question than your competitors. Then you need to just make sure that the content you're giving Google is in the correct format. It can deliver that content, or it believes you can deliver that content. So in the case where it's showing the answer on the SERP, which would be the case of a feature snippet, or perhaps a video that they sometimes now embed, it needs to be able to deliver that content correctly. And that means you just need the right player for the video in your page. It just needs to be a player that Google can pick up and put in the SERP, and it's very simple. YouTube, you put your embed link in and you're away. I mean, it's not complicated. Or when the user comes to your site, if Google sends the users through to your site, Google has to be convinced that you can deliver that content correctly. And that just means having a decent site that isn't really slow, and that you can use on a mobile device. I mean, that's the minimum you would want for your user anyway. Google's asking you for the minimum you would want for your user anyway.
Yeah.
So if you can get it to understand that you provide a relevant solution to the specific question that's just been asked, and remembering there are billions of questions asked every day, and you can convince it that yours is the most credible solution, and you can demonstrate to it that you can deliver that solution, you've won the game. And it really isn't difficult. I mean, it's not that technical game we were playing before. It's a very different game, and it is focused on the user. And the thing about brand SERPs, and this wraps it up really nicely, is if you don't have video boxes on your brand SERP, like when somebody searches your brand name, if there aren't the video boxes, then your video strategy is awful. It's not valuable to your users. Google can't see the value. It's never going to show you videos in the wider world. So if you sort that out, then you sort out your Twitter boxes, because you want the Twitter boxes. You need a decent Twitter strategy for that. Then you're starting to build a proper content strategy.
Yeah.
So if you start with your brand SERP, you're immediately building a better content strategy, which will then feed into your SEO without you even doing anything extra.
But the big thing for me, like the way you were talking about it, is that
sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah, but that it's also that like the way you look at it is through like many like fundamental principles, like what lies under it, and most people are focusing on the different tactics. And now you are basically saying that those small little tactics, they don't work as well because it's harder to like hack the algorithm. I think it's similar what's happening on YouTube. And then I think what's happening, at least that's my understanding, that people say, okay, then this doesn't work. But I think the way to make it work and then kind of switch your perspective is that you have to kind of understand it on one fundamental level, and then you can create as many tactics and strategies as you want. But the way you explain it is that you basically have to understand like what's under this, how this all machine works, and then what are the like basic necessities for you to rank, and then you can focus on those, and then those like small tactics that work now but maybe don't work in 2 weeks from now, you can do them, but these are just like kind of bonuses in a way.
Yeah, oh, I like that. I'll come back to that in a moment, but you don't need to understand how the machine works. There's no point even trying. I just explained it basically to say the machine is trying to get, or the whole aim of Google is to get the machine to provide the best answer or solution to its user as possible in every single circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. And that's what they're aiming to do. So there's no point now in trying to understand how the machine works, because you never will, because not even Google understands how it works.
No, I don't mean like the machine, like literally, but in a way that,
yeah,
that, okay, the way Google works now is that, okay, it's AI, and the way what they want, their goal is to, you know, deliver the best content. So then your role is to provide kind of in a way the best content, make sure it's congruent, and make sure there's its credibility. So like I'm talking about this kind of machine.
Sorry, yeah, and I was just trying to clarify that, because for me, I think that needs to be really, really clear. There's no point in trying to understand the machine. Sorry, I was maybe repeating what you'd already said, and I was unhelpful. But
no, that's good. That's good.
One thing that you did say is bonus, and I'd like to focus on the word bonus for a moment. Google is the bonus. Google isn't the target. Your users are the target. What you should be doing, in my opinion, is creating content on the platforms in the format that your audience is using, that's useful and helpful and valuable to your audience on those other platforms, be it YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Medium, Quora. What else would there be? I mean, even things like Crunchbase, Reddit, but even something like Crunchbase, which is a source of information for B2B. If you create content on Crunchbase, it will help Google.
Yeah.
But it will help Google secondarily to helping your user or your audience, who is B2B business people. But if we come back and you're saying, okay, I've created this great video for YouTube, for example, or a great post on Facebook. If I can make that valuable, useful, and for my audience, and make it helpful to my business, move my business forward a little bit, it's already paid for itself. Then what I need to do is take that content and package it for Google for that bonus.
I see.
And if you approach it from that point of view, you're making content for your audience, pushing it out to your audience, making the value of that content for yourself already without Google, and then saying, how do I package it for Google so that I can get a bonus for it? And Google, I mean, Google are happy with that. That's absolutely not a problem. And the packaging for Google, and that's what I talk about with understanding, credibility, deliverability, that's the packaging. And that would be my content strategy today, or it is my content strategy today for all my clients. We think of the platforms first. We think of the users first. So we say, okay, which platform they're hanging out on, we'll focus on that first. We'll create this content, we'll get them engaged, we'll get the audience into all this, and at the same time, we will also post it to our site in a different format. For example, we'll do a YouTube video with just timings on it on the YouTube channel, and then we'll put a whole transcript of that video on our website. That gives Google two choices. And it gives us two potential possibilities to appear in Google, but the video is already paid for itself on YouTube, so we don't actually need the Google payback, as it were. And so packaging, when I say packaging, I just mean, if you think about understanding, if I do a transcript, it understands the video, that's done, finished. Credibility, get some links and get your audience engaging with it. Google will see that. YouTube is part of it. If people are watching it and liking it and commenting on it on YouTube, it will see that credibility. If you can get your peers to talk about it, it can see that credibility too. If you can get your audience talking about it on social media and linking back to it, that's credibility too. Then deliverability, all you need, YouTube looks after the deliverability when you've embedded it in your site. All you need is a site that loads within 5 seconds. It doesn't have to be a super fast site. And it needs to be mobile compatible, because most people are, or a lot of people are on mobile today. So that's your deliverability. I mean, I haven't said anything complicated, and I haven't even mentioned the word code.
Yeah.
Any WordPress site with Gutenberg blocks, if you know WordPress, big CMS, great thing to use. Google loves it because it's 30% of the web, so Google understands how WordPress is presented. So you've already got an advantage if you use WordPress, because it dominates. If you use Yoast as a plugin, it does most of the technical stuff for you. You don't need to worry about it. Yoast is 50% of the WordPress. So that's 15% of the web for Google is exactly the same. It's WordPress plus Yoast. So you're already in the majority of of the web, and you kind of think, oh yeah, I don't want to be in the mojo. I want to be different. Be different with your design. Be different with your content. Because Google likes things that are standardized, and Yoast plus WordPress is standardized, and Google absolutely loves it because it makes it more deliverable, understandable, and also to a certain extent credible. But it's really the deliverability and the understandability of it. And so kind of from that point, you're saying, if I've got a WordPress site which is responsive, and I haven't messed with it too much by changing the theme, getting somebody to change absolutely everything in it because I actually want all the bells and whistles. Don't go for the bells and whistles. Go for something simple and efficient, and make the difference with the design and the content. Because then you've already got understanding and deliverability sold. It's done, it's finished. You don't have to think about it. Then you can go and you say, credibility, right, I need reviews, I need users interacting on my site, I need users linking into it, I need peers, I'm linking back to it or talking about it, talking about my content. I mean, why do I say the brand SERP guy all the time? Because people refer to it all the time, because that then identifies me as the brand SERP guy. And Google understands that when you said the brand SERP guy, I don't need the link. It knows you're talking about me because I've banged it home to everybody all the time. So you've got this thing of you don't need links anymore, you need mentions. Google understands that people are talking about you. So, sorry, I'm getting a bit overexcited, but it is an interesting concept that a lot of the understanding and deliverability are dealt with by WordPress and Yoast, leaving you only really the credibility to deal with. And it makes the content creation itself and thinking about your audience and where they're hanging out and where they will find value from this content as the single most important thing of your SEO strategy, which is what it should be.
I love how you broke it down to actually like some simple.
Yeah, I just made that up, by the way.
It's perfect. To like simple steps, because that's also shows that how much I think you know about it, because
I've thought about it far too much. But if I may pay you a compliment, what you did was bring the questions through to allow me to say that, or to prompt me to say that. And as I said, I'd never said that before, and that's a sign of a great interview. If I might be a little bit
happy to hear.
but it is. And every now and then I do an interview like this and I end up saying something, I think, wow, yeah, that's clear, that's straight, and it's easy to understand. And that was a moment.
No, and that's why I think these kind of discussions, even though some people say like, oh, maybe it's too long or whatever, but I think even though someone might be like you, an expert in SEO, it's also some things are in your head, you're thinking about it, and sometimes you need to like articulate it, right? Like with someone else to really say it, and then you're like, oh, that actually makes sense, or oh, maybe I didn't know fully, and then I ask you more questions, and then it clarifies. So in a way, also like it helps you get answers to some, and you get better what you do. Also like talking about it, but in a way where it's like a two-way conversation, not just you talking to the public, because that's good for sharing, but it's not so good for like actually say ironing out your ideas, your knowledge, and kind of simplifying it.
No, 100%. That's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I actually just wrote an article for Search Engine Journal about understanding credibility and deliverability, and it was published Friday. And the SEO industry as a whole doesn't say what I'm just saying now. It's new for the SEO industry as well as a concept. So I'm not saying the SEO industry doesn't understand what I'm saying. I'm saying that they haven't thought of it in this manner. And it's been a really big success. And people are now saying to me, oh, can you explain more about this? Because it's so simple. And it makes SEO so much easier for everybody else to understand. And it makes SEO obviously less scary. And it makes SEO more a part of a larger, wider digital marketing content strategy. And I think that's also something that really excites me. And if you say, what makes you get up in the morning? For example, me in my little corner in Paris, being able to change something for some people in terms of kind of how they perceive this and how comfortable they feel. I mean, what I see with my clients is after a coaching session, they say, yeah, that makes total sense. And when they say that, you go, that's a good thing. That means we're on the right track.
Yeah.
That means I've understood what it is your business needs to do for Google. And it isn't technical stuff. It's how we're going to organize our content strategy, given what you already have, the resources you have moving forwards, and what your priorities are within your own business. And if we can nail that, and then tag Google on, as you said, as the bonus at the end. It makes total sense, and it's so much less scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like follow the breadcrumbs and it kind of makes all logical sense.
Oh, you're good at this. I like that.
So I don't know if it makes sense, the question, because one that I kind of wanted to ask you regarding the SEO industry and your take on it, but maybe you answer it. If so, just tell me. But I just wanted to know maybe like, what's like one biggest, if you already haven't mentioned it, like what's one biggest, not misconception, but like something that you believe in when it comes to the SEO and that word, but most people in that space like would disagree with you with, like, or you disagree with most people. Like, what's this like one main thing that you would see that you have a totally different like opinion on, different view, or different kind of idea?
Well, I have. Right, basically, I think I've got 4 different things that I'm really keen on. Brand SERPs. The SEO industry tells me brand SERPs, they're really easy. I know all about them. I deal with them all the time. And I think they're underestimating it. So that would be the first thing I think the SEO industry hasn't understood about what I'm talking about, is that they underestimate the power and the intricacy of brand SERPs.
Mm-hmm.
Number one. Number two is I wrote an article last year, Darwinism in Search, and it's about how these different rich elements, SERP features, get onto the pages of Google. And it's Darwinism, and it's really, really, really cool. And it's another really easy way to visualize and understand how Google's functioning today. And I thought it would catch on really quickly, and it hasn't. And it's one of a guy called Gary Ilyash from Google, who's one of the spokespeople for Google, who actually explained. But people have been saying, "Oh, it's Jason Barnard's theory." It's not. It's what Gary Ilyash explained, that they explained to their engineers. So all I've done is basically repeated what he told me. Then I went and did interviews with team leads at Bing, which is Microsoft's search engine, and they confirmed that it works exactly the same way at Bing. So we have these 2 major search engines that work in the same way, and it's Darwinism. It's cheated Darwinism, because obviously they're money-making machines and they can't just leave everything to survival of the fittest. But
in what way you mean Darwinism in that context?
Well, you have the blue link algorithm, which is the fundamental algorithm, and it ranks all the what I call the blue link algorithm. It ranks web pages by the content of those web pages in relation to the query the user has made, the problem they're expressing, or the question they've asked. Then the video algorithm comes into play, and it will say, okay, I've got these videos, and these videos are really, really good. And so it will put in a bid. They call them bids, and it's not a monetary bid. It's a bid of value to the user. And if the bid of the videos is higher than the bid of the top blue link, the videos get a place.
Oh, I see.
Then the image algorithm comes in, and they're all built on the same data set, i.e. what Google has collected from websites, and the same basic algorithms. They're adaptations of the same set of algorithms that the blue link algorithm works on. It's all interconnected. So the image algorithm comes on, it says, I've got a bid, and it's going, oh, that's not good enough, so you're not getting a place. Then feature snippet, Twitter boxes, podcast boxes, all of these different elements. And basically, so if they can prove, or if they can make a bid that shows that they bring more value to the user in the circumstances the user finds themselves in, i.e. the question they have asked, the problem they have expressed, and the platform they are on, i.e. device, sorry, they are on, and the geolocation and the language and their search history, all of this comes into play. They get a place. So it's Darwinism, i.e. it's the most appropriate, it's the fittest, and it will get a place. But then I talked to a guy called Nathan Chalmers at Bing, who blew my mind, because he said, oh, there's a whole page algorithm too.
A page?
But whole page algorithm.
It's
genius. And it's so obvious when he says it to you as well. And so you've got all these elements, and so the algorithm themselves has said, these are the 10 best blue links, but we're going to put videos, Twitter boxes, and images. So those go off the bottom. So we've lost those 3 blue links. Here we go. That's your result. But he says, no. We then have another algorithm that looks at that and says, well, from past experience, we know that videos don't satisfy the user for this type of query. So even though they won their place through Darwinistic survival of the fittest, we're going to throw you out anyway. But we do know The knowledge panel, for example, is often useful to users. So we're going to bring in the knowledge panel, even though it didn't appear to have enough value to the user, which allows it to bring in new elements and get rid of old elements and adapt the SERP, the results page, according to real user data. Now, here's a trick. When SEOs ask the people at Google, do you use click-through data, i.e. do you use user behavior on Google's pages for ranking? They say no. And everyone goes, okay, but we don't believe you, but they don't believe them. The fact is they don't use it for ranking. They use it in the whole page algorithm. So it's not technically used for ranking, so they're not lying. But it is used to sort the wood from the chaff, as we say in English, to redesign the results page according to user behavior in the past and machine learning understood probable user behavior in the given case. And that's really important, is it doesn't have to have seen the query before. It can evaluate whether or not this particular element will help or not according to the past experience, the massive data these machines are working on. So once again, we're in machine learning. It isn't somebody pressing a button saying, we don't want videos. It's a machine who's being given the reward of being told how terribly good and clever it is, making these decisions based on the feedback that the people from Google and from Microsoft are giving that machine about the success and failure of its previous actions, which is genius. And it's so simple. And it sounds, but listen back to that little chunk, but it's incredibly important. And it does make it much easier, for me at least, to approach all this and say, okay, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to provide the most appropriate content to satisfy Google's user, who is potentially my audience. And there's a very important point. Google's users are not your users. Your audience is a subset of Google's users. And you only realistically want to appeal to the subset of Google's audience, Google's users who are truly your audience. And if you bear that in mind, focus on your user, bring value to your user, and you'll win the game.
And that's a great, I think, segue to the last topic. We can end the SEO talk, but I think if someone is listening to this, he's gonna be taking notes. And now I think some maybe light bulbs are gonna shine, and like, now I get this. Now it's not so complex, and I can approach it more like strategically. And maybe even figure it out myself. So maybe I can pay someone, but maybe I don't have to, because now I see that it's not as complex.
Well, as you said, if you pay somebody else to help with your SEO, here's a little hint: is if whatever they're doing doesn't serve one or more of understanding, credibility, or deliverability, they're doing something that isn't going to help. So basically, it's an easy way for you to say which one does it serve, and if they can't make a decent argument for it serving one or more of those pillars, tell them they're getting it wrong.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip.
Which actually gives you more control. I mean, we used to be scared of developers because we didn't know how to code. Now we've got things like WordPress and Yoast. We don't need the developers so much, which they probably don't like, but it means we don't need to confront them so much. We don't need to understand so much. Now we're scared of SEOs because they're now coming and saying, oh, you need links, you need this, you need that, you need schema markup. You do need schema markup, but Yoast does it for you, so why bother thinking about it? And you can actually get rid of that barrier once again by saying something simple, which is, as a marketer, I want Google to understand what I'm offering. I want it to believe I'm credible, and I want it to understand that it or I can deliver this content and satisfy its user's question or their problem. And if the SEO cannot argue convincingly that what he or she is doing is going to serve one or more of these aims, help Google in one of these manners, don't do it.
That's a good, great advice. Great advice. So I guess the last thing that I wanted to ask you and talk about is like your you're running a podcast now.
Yeah.
And your transition, because I think I read it or heard it somewhere that you turned from a presenter of ideas to the world and hoping that people will like them, to a host pulling ideas from people. So I guess I'm curious, like what made you go into that space, like start a podcast and make that transition from this
Right.
to this, and what keeps you kind of going, like what's the motivation behind it?
Well, interesting enough, actually, that I talked to the guys at Yoast. They invited me over to be part of their academy, not as a
Nice.
student, as a
Congrats.
teacher. I hasten to add. And we were having a beer, and one of them just turned around to me. It was actually Yoast himself, and said, "Where have you come from? Nobody had heard of Jason Barnard a year ago. And now you're everywhere, and you're one of the leading experts in the world in SEO. Where did you come from, and why did we never hear about you before?" And the reason was because of the disaster with the blue dog and the yellow koala in Mauritius. I had spent over 10 years trying to pay off the debts and get myself back on my feet. So I focused 100% on just doing the work. And then 2.5 years ago, I found myself in a situation where the debts were paid off and I could actually start doing other things again that weren't making money. And I asked a guy called Anton Schulke from SEMrush if I could do a series, because I was really interested in hosting a series about answer engine optimization. And I thought, I'm so clever. I'm going to host this series, and it's going to be 15 webinars in 15 weeks. And I'm going to explain to the world about my theory. And I'm going to get 50 experts on to all just agree with me, basically. This was me being very naive and thinking I was smarter than the rest of the world put together. And he agreed to do it, which was wonderful and really generous of him. And we got 50 guests on. And after 2 episodes, I was going, number one, I don't understand half as much as I thought I understood. Number two, my theory doesn't fly as high as I thought it was. Number three, I need these people because I'm not going to get through this if they don't actually contribute an awful lot to it. So I did this 15 episode webinar series and learned a phenomenal amount from incredibly kind people, very generous people. And you'll find in the SEO industry, digital marketing industry, as a wider description of it, immense kindness, empathy, and desire to share. It's not a scary place at all. It's really, really, really nice people who really want to help other people and share their knowledge. And that series, at the end of it, I just thought, I know so much more than I did at the start of it. What can I do to carry that idea on, which is basically learning from asking people questions, people who really know what they're talking about. And I just said, right, I became a digital nomad, packed up my stuff, gave the flat away, and started going to conferences around the world 1.5 years ago and interviewed people. I found people having interesting conversations, then grabbed one of them and said, do an interview, please. And I basically, one guy, who's a guy called Brad Geddes, he was talking about why Bing will never shut down, why Microsoft will continue with Bing even if it loses money. And I said, oh, shut up. And he looked really offended. And I thought, oh, I didn't mean quite like that. I just meant, please don't say any more, because if you say some more, I won't be able to then ask you the questions and be surprised and interested and intrigued by your answers. And I did the interview with him and it was really good. And I've done 160 interviews now, and it's been an incredible experience because each and every one of them, I'm asking people who know boatloads about their topic and are really enthusiastic about their topic to explain to me the things I don't understand about their topic, which probably means that most people don't understand about their topic. And they do it really, really, really well. Some of them are a bit complicated in their explanation. So what I then do is summarize it in a simpler manner. Some of them really do nail it. And we end up with these great conversations like this conversation, but where people are sharing incredible insights that you didn't expect into a topic you didn't know enough about, and making it much less scary. And I've learned more in the last 2 years of doing that than I did in the 10 previous years working for different clients on different projects. And it's amazing just by asking people. You learn.
It's mostly SEO focused, or the guests, like, are they mostly in digital marketing or what? Because you say different topics, so like what?
It's all digital marketing, but then all marketing to some extent is now partially digital or by offshoot digital. Everything ends up online at some point in the Western world, at least. It was very SEO. The first year was incredibly SEO. So the first 120 episodes are focused on SEO with a digital marketing outlook. And the last 6 months, I've tried to get more marketers on. But so far, some have been great, but a lot of it for me is not actually particularly helpful information.
Okay.
It's not very actionable.
You mean the interviews or?
Yeah, I mean, I won't name names, but the last 6 months I've had about half marketers and influencers and half digital marketing, SEO, Google related stuff. And I can't help but be disappointed by the insights I've had from the people from the marketing side of things. And it might be that I've just chosen the wrong people.
I think it's partially also because, at least that's my personal opinion from being in this space, is that people like you are, I would say, more like a quite rare occurrence. Like most people in that space are people who've been there like 2 years, 1 year, 3 years. They're maybe like my age or something like that. They usually think they know everything, but they actually don't know. They usually say what they are about is the most important thing, but they don't have like the bigger, because they haven't been in the trenches for long enough. There's nothing wrong with that, but just like there is, I think, maybe too much confidence because maybe of the age, and that it's something new, and there's not enough people like you to balance things out, like people older, people who have been doing something for 20 years, and maybe that skews that. At least that's from my perspective, that looks like it. But
no, but it's interesting what you're saying. I think kind of that, once again, the lack of empathy for the person asking the questions. They're thinking, what do I want to say? And I've noticed that, and it's not actually, that's not just the marketing guys, people, it's everybody. Some guests, you can see they're just thinking, how can I say what I want to say? So they're not actually listening to the questions at all. And for me, the conversation is about flowing backwards and forwards. And at some point, you're going to get what you wanted to say in there. And they fail to stand back and say, what am I actually providing? As opposed to what am I getting? I mean, they're thinking, I'm getting my message across.
Yeah.
Actually, how can I help the people who are watching this, and how can I help this presenter make this a better show? But also, I mean, from my point of view, when I'm interviewing people, I would hope they would think, what can I teach Jason that he didn't already know?
Yeah, because if you can teach Jason, or you can probably teach all the people listening.
That's not what I meant, but yeah.
No, but I mean, like that's kind of partially true, right? Like if someone can have a mindset like, oh, I'm gonna teach or tell something to this guy, or share something that is gonna be really like new or interesting to the host, then it's most likely gonna be really insightful to the people listening to the show too,
100%.
right?
Yeah, I mean, my podcast has got a good listenership, and most of all, a very faithful listenership. And I think probably like yours, a lot of the listenership, or the faithfulness of that listenership, is because they know it's always going to be an enjoyable conversation. And this was a very enjoyable conversation. I have enjoyable conversations with my guests, and I think that's a phenomenally important part. As you said earlier on, it's how people feel about what's been said that's incredibly important. The message underneath is obviously very important too. But if you can get people to feel something, that they've been in nice company, let's say, for the last 2 hours, I think it now is, then you've won the game. And if they get useful information as well, wow, like Google, that's a bonus.
Yeah, I think it's, I think podcasts, I don't know what's your opinion about podcasts, but for me, it's like this beautiful thing that just came kind of out of nowhere. I mean, it's not like revolutionary in a way that it suddenly popped, because it was just slowly, brewing and then just kind of raised to the top. But it's just got this beautiful, I don't know, like idea behind it. It's just like you can do so many things with it. It's very like independent, and you can have those long conversations. You can connect with people, especially in these times where like the virus, people don't meet as much, and you can kind of, as you said, like, and the people listening, they can kind of just be in the room with you when the two people are talking. And that's what I usually love about like the best podcasts I watch, like Joe Rogan or something. It's like, you know, you just sit there, you pull it up, and you know, you just like them talking for a couple hours, and you feel like you're just a person like sitting in the same room and listening on the conversation. Maybe you can't say anything, but it's still I don't know,
Sure.
it's just great to
No, and I mean, I've never done a 2-hour podcast before, so.
Hmm.
I,
How was good?
but it was. I mean, it's now. Yeah, it's a little over 2 hours, is it? I think now, but I would have been scared if I thought it was going to be 2 hours right off the bat, because I think, you know, I haven't got that much to say. Turns out I've got probably more than that to say. I just didn't know it.
You didn't know.
But just the idea of having a 2-hour conversation filmed, and anybody watching a 2-hour conversation, if anyone's made it this far, congratulations, that's a major achievement. Yeah, I mean, anything over an hour, you kind of think, isn't that getting a bit long? But maybe not. Maybe I've just not thought about it this way before.
We'll see. That's also part of my experiment. But I think there is, you know, there's a few people out there in the space that made it big, like Joe Rogan, but not just him, who have proven that there is a need for you know, the long conversation too. It's not the end be all, but people enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I mean, sure, 100%. I mean, sorry, I'm not saying this is a bad format. It's kind of like, it's easy to keep people's attention for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Up to an hour, yeah, okay. When you get to 2 hours, you're getting somebody to commit quite a big chunk of their life to sitting and listening to you. So I think the weight on your shoulders is saying, to do 2 hours, it has to be consistently interesting, enjoyable, and valuable all at the same time. And that's a big challenge you've set yourself there.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But yeah, but before we click like the, you know, stop record button, then maybe you have some like last thoughts, meaning you can say about like where people can find you, but also maybe say something that I haven't asked you about and you still have it on your mind. You know, sometimes happens,
right,
and you just want to kind of let go of it, share like your last thoughts, and then, you know, where can people find you, and then we can kind of wrap this up.
Right, well, you can find me on Twitter, Jason M. Barnard. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jason M. Barnard. You can find me by searching my own name, Jason Barnard, on Google, and you'll see my amazingly wonderful brand SERP, and you'll see my life story thrown before you by Google. So that's, I mean, the easiest way to find me is search for my name. That's should be a given, in fact, and I never really think about saying that. I'll actually end with one thing which I really like, is one thing I learned, a word that we have in French, is lagnac. And it's a word that really, really, really makes sense to me. And it's a bit like the American word drive, but without the commercial, pushy, disagreeable aspect that I find the word. I've got drive, you know. That lagnac is a positive desire to move the needle. And it's, when you get up in the morning, somebody who's got lagnac is somebody who's going, right, what are we going to do today? That's me. And France is my spiritual home. And in fact, now I'm French, so it is my home. Probably from the beginning, because I quickly cottoned on to the fact that the word lagnac just describes me.
That's, I guess, a perfect summary. And let's hope that other people can find the lagnac in themselves so they can achieve the things they want in life, like you did, and try different things, fail, and move forward every day, waking up and just kind of confronting what's in front of you instead of giving up.
Brilliant stuff. I love that.
So merci beaucoup, Jason. Just show off my French, and it was lovely. More than 2 hours conversation. I hope people learned and you know, about SEO, but also took some takeaways from your story about, you know, like from your music times to creating the TV cartoon, to then living on Mauritius and hiring people and working there. I think there's plenty of takeaways. So thanks again.
Well, I learned a lot from my own story. So hopefully, other people can take stuff away. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.